Mihi kia ranginui e tūnei, mihi kia papatunuku e takoto nei. Mihi hoki ki te whare tapu e machu tapu e tūnei, kia koutou katoa, i aku rangatira, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko hukurangi te maunga, ko waipu te awa, ko Ngāti Porou te iwi, ko Hirini ka ahau. Good morning. It's my pleasure and my honour to be here this morning to share some thoughts on our readings this morning. I'd like to thank you, Helen, for the invitation. So I'm from Ngāti Porou, our tribe. We're famous for a couple of things. One for our humility, the other for our loquaciousness. And Helen said, can you keep it to about 10 minutes? Because she knows my Ngāti Porou mouth can often go for quite a long time. So I'll try and keep it brief, and I look forward to sharing a little bit after the service this morning as well. But I'd like to start with a Ngāti Porou story. So in Ngāti Porou, we come from the East Cape of the North Island. If you look for that on a map, you'd find a map of the universe and find the centre of that universe, and then you'd find Ngāti Porou there. And otherwise, if you don't know where it is, apart from feeling sorry for you, you always have the opportunity to go there sometime in your life, and I highly recommend it. Our land is dominated by our sacred mountain Hikurangi and our river, the Waipu, which flows from that mountain, and we are the people of Ngāti Porou who live with that mountain and that river. At the mouth of the river, it is a complicated little ecosystem, and one thing we have there, we catch fish called kahawai. Kahawai are a slightly mysterious fish in Western science. Little is known about them, about their breeding habits, about where they come from in particular, but now they're being caught in large numbers. There's a lot of fisheries around New Zealand. In the middle of the year, a star sign appears. We can see it from this land, called Matariki. Matariki has several names around the Pacific Rim. The Greek name is the Pleiades. In Japan, I believe it's called Subaru. It has different names around the Pacific Rim. When the Matariki star sign appears in the middle of the year, it strikes a particular rock at the mouth of our river. That means for us that the kahawai are starting to migrate. In our tradition, they're coming from the Pacific. It's also a time we take the kumara, the sweet potato, we take the seedlings and we plant them. So it's one way of us reading our connection with nature. Our food supply, the fish are coming, the kumara, our staple food is ready for planting. And then about September, the kahawai arrive at the mouth of the river and we start catching these fish. Now these fish are, we got particular ways of catching these fish that we've used for generation after generation. But basically it's used human bait. So you get the young foolish one, in this case was my brother, for example. You normally pick the city kid who can't say no, and you tie them to a rope and you basically throw them in the water and you let them drown in a controlled fashion. At the river mouth at the beach, there's no continental shelf, so you just get sucked straight out to sea, and if you didn't have that rope, you'd be in an awful lot of trouble. You'd end up in South America somewhere at some stage. And you have this big net, and you catch the kahawai, and you drag that person back in as a human boy, and you bring that kahawai catch into shore. If it's the first catch of kahawai for the season, you take the first kahawai and you take it and you split it open and you pour its blood on the person who caught the fish and on the other fishermen. It's a man's task. Only men take part in this fishing, normally without clothes on, which adds to the fun if you're a city boy having to do this for the first time. But we take that fish, we spread its blood on the fishermen, and then we get a pole, a stick, and we put it by the river mouth, and we take that first kahawai and we tie it to that pole as an offering to Tangaroa, the god of the sea. And that is our offering of the first fruits of the season. And that is our offering of thanksgiving for the gift of tangaroa and of creation. Why do we make this offering? Because tangaroa helped to guide us here to this land. About 5,000 years ago, our ancestors left Southeast Asia. You can go to parts of Southeast Asia, you can go to eastern Taiwan, you can go to Malaya, you can go to parts of Indonesia, the Philippines, and the indigenous peoples there, their language, their customs are very eerily similar to ours here, because that's where we came from. And we set off from those lands, and we set off across the Pacific on a 5,000-year journey. We went through all the Pacific, through Micronesia, through Polynesia. Our journeying stories are shared through our waka. In Samoa and Savaii, the waka Takitimu stopped there and for repairs and carried on to Aotearoa, and I'm a descendant of that waka. All our waka came through that long, long journey. We went in search of a new Hawaii, a new homeland. And along the way, Tangaloa has many names, but of course the sea was an integral part of that journeying. You don't sit on a small island in the middle of the Pacific and think, I'm going to hop in a small waka now and I'm going to set off, and I'm pretty confident that in that direction there's another very small piece of land. You don't do that without a sense of confidence. And if you do, you won't live very long. You set off, you follow the signs and wonders that have been presented to you. You converse with the sea life, with the whales, with the dolphins, with the birds. You read the currents. You particularly read the stars, the moon, the sun, and you head off with a sense of confidence. If any of you have flown to the United States before and sat on the lovely Air New Zealand flight and looked at the little map thing as you fly across the Pacific, you know what I'm talking about. The distance between islands is immense. I wouldn't fancy it myself on a little wooden waka, but my ancestors had the confidence to do that. And not just the confidence, the faith to do that. They understood that they were being guided, that they had a particular purpose, that they were setting out with the protection of their gods and of creation. Until they got here to Aotearoa. Now you see what I did there? I made that entire journey about us being Māori. So I often say to my Samoan friends, sure, we stopped in Samoa, but we were still looking for the better place. And of course, from my perspective, the best place, the pinnacle of that 5,000-year journey was Ngāti Porou, which we eventually arrived at. It's the pinnacle of language, of culture, of humility also, in a Trump-esque kind of way. So we read those signs and wonders, and God blessed us, and God protected us, and God's many manifestations of creation guided us here to this land. And we kept those stories. And so when we go fishing, when we offer our first fruits to tangaroa, we're remembering that journey. We're remembering the journey that our ancestors undertook to get us here, and the many blessings that creation gave us as we traveled. In Deuteronomy, they are remembering their stories. They're remembering the journey that they took, the very, very long journey that they undertook to find that land of milk flowing with milk and honey, the signs and wonders that God gave them on that journey. And as we enter into Lent, of course, we have the classic Lenten reading of Jesus being tempted by the devil. Jesus being offered all sorts of treasures, Jesus wasn't just being offered treasures and wealth and power. Jesus was being offered a new way to think about himself. Jesus was being offered new stories. You can be powerful. You can overturn the ways your ancestors thought. Don't worry about it. You can have a new way of doing things. And Jesus' response is constant, to return to the stories of his ancestors, to say, that is not our way. We will remain truthful to our way, to our stories, to our way of being. Yes, we could do these other ways, but we choose not to because God gave us these ways. We will retain them. He was having his identity challenged, is one way of thinking about it. If you are the Son of God, do this. Well, Jesus knew who he was and remained firm in that sense of identity. For us here in Aotearoa in 2019, it's a constant challenge for us to remain firm to who we might think we are, particularly here in Aotearoa, in our colonial context. I was going to do a little riff on what Egypt might be and who Pharaoh might be. I'll leave that up to you to think about in our context here today. But we are faced with particular challenges. As Māori, yes, we have these stories, we have these journeys, we have these gifts that we were given, we have the first fruits. But we run a huge fishing industry as Māori. It was part of our treaty settlement. It was an attempt to seek justice in this land. It was prophetic in a lot of ways, except our fishing industry practices are often very problematic. Our iwi fishing practices can be very difficult. We were using Indonesian slave labour as much as any other company from time to time. We had lost sight somewhere along the way of these stories, of these offerings of first fruits, of these gifts that creation had given us. And instead we were just exploiting it as just another resource because KPMG told us we needed to maximise our return. The devil is constantly tempting us to turn away from our stories. And yet we're here in this land together with the Levites and the aliens. It's interesting, in the Paipera and the Māori version of the Bible, they use the word mānene for aliens, which can be outsiders, can be people who are lost or dispossessed, can also be pilgrims. But here as Māori and Aotearoa, we share this land with many others. And in Deuteronomy it says, we share this land, we share this story of this land together. And there, I think, is the blessing for us, the opportunity. That kahawai story is very precious to me as Ngāti Porou. Those stories are very common across us as Māori, and they're stories we hold close to our hearts. And I think we have an opportunity to share them together, to think about what creation means in the context of this land, together with the Levites, the aliens, the mānene, the pilgrims. And to think about our future in this land and how we want to share those stories and how we want to live out those stories. Because we're always going to be tempted by new stories, particularly at the moment by stories of power and profit and control and domination. It's particularly challenging with an issue, an existential challenge like climate change, how we might deal with those. And I think the opportunity for us to share stories, which is a great opportunity that we've been presented with today, for example, to think about how we bring these stories together. How does the story of Deuteronomy? I'm not sure how challenged you were by the idea that we have this God called tangaroa. God is a very imperfect word in this sense. It's a very Greek word in this sense. It doesn't do justice at all to the idea of tangaroa. And I'm fully able to be Christian and understand tangaroa as part of my life. I have no problem, and I'm not being synchristic either. But we offer you those stories to think about in the season of Lent as we think about creation, as we think about these challenges in our lives, and we think about where we go from here together. I leave you with those words. Amen.